Gun Owners Radio, we make activism easy. Welcome, everybody. This is show number 450, which I'm very, very proud of. Thanks for listening to Gun Owners Radio. I'm here with Dakota. Dakota, welcome. How are you?
Good. How are you?
Fantastic. Alicia's not here. She's on a special mission sabbatical or something. I'm not sure where she is today, but she's doing something. She's always doing something. She's so awesome. So check it out. We have another really jam-packed episode today. We're going to learn about hyper-realistic training. That's medical training from Wyatt Sabo from Strategic Operations. We're going to talk to award-winning journalist John Petrolino. He's going to join us and give us an update on some racist gun control policies out of New Jersey. And then the Ninth Circuit strikes again and performs amazing feats of mental gymnastics and rules that magazine bans are constitutional. You're going to find out today if you're a felon or not, thanks to this new ruling. We're going to talk all about it, all this and more. Insights for our growing community owners, gun owner community. Boy, easy for you to say. So stick with us, and you're going to see an amazing show.
Gun Owners Radio is broadcasting from our new home at Discount Gun Mart, DGM. Check out DGM in San Diego on Marina Boulevard and in Santee off of Gillespie Field off the 67.
There you go. Yeah, it's so thankful to DGM. You guys are doing such a great job in hosting us and helping us set up this studio and everything. So reward them. They're having a, hopefully you went to their sidewalk sale yesterday, which is always fun. They have it every year. They have it multiple times per year. So
look up discountgunmart.com for more info.
There you go. And also go to our website, gunownersradio.com. Subscribe. Go to our YouTube channel, youtube.com/gunownersradio. Follow us on Facebook. Follow us on Instagram. Sign up for our email and tell your friends. Make sure that we are not the best kept secret in the Second Amendment community. Help us out. We want to get all this info out to people. We want them to be just as involved and passionate about the Second Amendment as you are. So this week, wanted to pause for a second and talk about the fact that this week is the 5-year anniversary of when the COVID shutdown happened. And, what does that have to do with Second Amendment? It's got a lot to do with politics. And politics and the Second Amendment I got to tell you, they go hand in hand. It was, I still think, the biggest thing to happen to politics, to culture, to this country since World War II. Nothing changed the way that you live your life as much as COVID did, and what happened, and mostly the reaction to COVID. And it was a big, big deal. I mean, things truly, your life now is different in the United States because of COVID and the reaction to COVID. And it's worth talking about some of the things that were done right, some of the things that were done wrong. But I wanted to just revisit when all this happened, when the governor of California, our favorite, Newsom, actually announced the shutdown. San Diego County Gun Owners, we put up a post, and I wanted to remind people exactly what we put 5 years ago this week. So if you could display that for people. So this was, again, the day that the actual order, the stay-at-home order came out. And I felt it was important to get involved, even though, again, this wasn't directly Second Amendment related. But I wanted to make sure that people had some leadership and some guidance. So please understand, this happened March 19th, 2020. So again, 5 years ago this week. Starts out, please understand what this order means. This is not a movie. There aren't going to be military patrols in your neighborhood. Do not blow this out of proportion. He, meaning Gavin Newsom, is asking people to just stay at home as much as possible until further notice. You can still leave your house for necessary trips like groceries, banking, gas, etc. Please do not spread misinformation or make this appear to be something it is not. Just take a minute, read this article, continue to communicate with others, and educate yourself on the details. And please, if you need help now or weeks from now, let us or someone know. This is my personal cell phone. And then I put my personal cell phone, 858-335-9320. I don't care what time of day or night it is. If you're reading this and you're in need and you don't think you have any other options, call me or text me. I will do my best to help or find resources for whatever you're facing. You will never be alone. Take the next few hours to think of ways you can help others. Know that this too shall pass. Decide right now to be able to look back on these few weeks and be proud of who you were and how you helped and what you did. Together we will win. I think that was an important message, and I think that it resonated, and I know that we did get requests. People did text and call me. We were able to help. We did make sure that the gun shops, for example, and gun ranges understood exactly what was going on. We did reach out. I did reach out personally to the county board of supervisors and said, hey, these guys, these gun shops and ranges, they got to be able to stay open. I spoke with the sheriff, and we did make sure that until at the time the Trump administration came out with guidance and said, yes, they are essential. They do need to stay open. We were able to keep the gun shops open, and we were able to give the gun shops guidance on what exactly they did need to do in order to stay open. Even went outside of my lane a little bit. There was a gym up in Ramona that was being harassed by law enforcement, by the district attorney, and basically being threatened to be shut down. And we became very vocal and said, hey, wait a minute, some of the folks who we endorsed, we helped get elected, are now doing things to, shut people down and, ruin their livelihood and, basically going way beyond what the power that we entrust with them to be, elected officials ever should include. And we're not okay with that. And I'm very proud of the way our organization reacted to it. I'm very proud of the way our members pitched in and said, hey, you know what? We're going to help people. We're going to do the right thing. And we're going to make sure that we get through this. It lasted far longer and was far more overreaching than anybody ever anticipated. And we're still learning some of the mistakes that were made, some of the misinformation, some of the things that people use to benefit from this rather than, just try to get through it and help others try to get through it. But for the most part, San Diego County Gun Owners members were wonderful. We're absolutely wonderful. I remember there was one kind of funny story. I did get phone calls. I did get emails. People that needed a helping hand for one reason or another. But one that sticks out that was actually kind of funny is I got an email from someone, and she said, hey, my power is going to get turned off, and I don't know what to do. Me and my kid, we're here, and we need help and whatever. And I tried to get a hold of her, tried to call her. I sent her emails and said, hey, what exactly is going on here? And long story short is I decided, well, okay, I'm going to go. And she had her address on the email. I said, I'm going to go to her house and figure out exactly what's going on. And it was up by Rainbow, kind of by Fallbrook off the 15. Mm-hmm. And I had no idea what I was getting into. In fact, my wife, before I left the house at the time, she said, well, what are you going to do? And I said, I don't really know. But I have a gun and a credit card, and that pretty much solves about 90% of life's problems. They can be solved with one or the other, or sometimes both. So we went to this house. I met up with John Becker, one of our fantastic volunteers. He was real close to his house and said, hey, we got to go help somebody. There's something's going on. I think it's COVID related. It seems, she needs help. So we went to this house, couldn't find anybody there. Didn't seem to be anything, that was happening that was wrong. So John and I went and had lunch right down the street. And while we were having lunch, she actually called me. Turns out that she was contacting SDCGO, but she meant to contact SDG&E. Mm-hmm. And she was just having difficulty paying her bill, or something was going on with her bill. And she got confused and contacted SDCGO rather than SDG&E. Kind of funny. But, I was thankful that, it wasn't anything more serious. But there really were things, it was a very serious time politically. It was a very serious time culturally. And I'm glad that we got through it. I'm glad. I hope that nothing that bad medically happens ever again. I mean, there really truly were people that lost their lives, and that's horrible and tragic. But I also hope that those in positions of power learned from this and never overstep the power that we've given them, that we've trusted with them. Never overstep it the way they did in COVID ever again. Ever again. So I just wanted to stop, 5-year anniversary, acknowledge, talk about how proud I am of our members and our organization, and hope everybody's doing okay. So there you go.
All right.
Anything, Dakota?
I mean, no, I think STCGO had a really good response. I liked that post that she wrote 5 years ago. Seems like not correct. It feels like it was longer and shorter somehow at the same time. But I think it's really important for our members to know that we, the STCGO and you led with integrity that whole time. And I think you did a good job.
Well, thank you. I think we all did, which is wonderful. All right, great. Well, let's move on. What do you got? What's next?
We are going to do our gun truth of the week.
Gun truth of the week. Okay, this is where we come up with a fact that has to do with Second Amendment, gun use, gun ownership that you're not going to hear from the mainstream media. And today's gun truth, this week's gun truth of the week is Vernon Kinsey is a Canadian psychologist who studied violent crime offenders, sex offenders, sexually violent predators, juvenile delinquency, and ways to predict, assess, and manage individuals with antisocial tendencies. He published a study called Rape Completion and Victim Injury as a Function of Female Resistance Strategy. In that study, he found that, quote, resistance of any kind was associated with incomplete attacks, and that resistance where the victim had a weapon like a gun made the attack far less likely to be completed. His official conclusion was, quote, the form of resistance that appears to be most effective in preventing sexual assault was a gun. Basically, he's saying if you are a woman and you're being assaulted, if you are protected, especially by having a gun, that it is far less likely that that attack will be completed and that criminals' plans will be foiled. That is your gun truth of the week. Okay, Q&A. You have Q's, we have A's. People ask questions all the time, actually. They send in emails, they send in direct messages, they send me text calls, emails, all kinds of stuff. They have questions, we have answers. Okay, this week we have a couple questions. First off, question. I'm a welder, so I can't carry AWIB, which of course Dakota stands for.
Well, it's AIWB, appendix
AIWB.
inside the waistband.
Yes, exactly. My job also prohibits, maybe I typoed that. Anyway, he can't carry inside the waistband. My job also prohibits firearms. What options do I have to carry at work? I would like to carry since I've witnessed a workplace shooting at my last job, and my current job has zero security. People can just walk in through any door or garage door that they please without anyone asking questions, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, so I'm not an attorney. This is not legal advice. If you want legal advice, you have to go through a properly licensed attorney. But here's what my opinion is. First off, you have to determine if it is legal or illegal to carry at your workplace. Or is it just banned from policy? In other words, do you work at a place that is considered a quote-unquote sensitive area where they have a ban on carrying? If they do, then I never recommend you break the law. So that's one level. If you work at a place and it's just their policy that you can't carry, then your worst case scenario is really that if they find out, you'll get fired. At my last job, I worked in an office building up on the 5th floor, and I did not have a carry permit, but I did have kind of a mini get-home bag. And I'll tell you, I think I put that together. Do you remember when San Diego, all the electricity went out for like a day. Do you remember that? Gosh, that must have been 15 years ago now.
I don't think I lived here yet.
No? Okay. Well, for one day, we had like no electricity. It just went out at like 2 in the afternoon on like a Thursday or something like that. And anyway, I had this get home bag, and I had my pistol there, and it was in a locked drawer in my desk. It was against the company's policy, but I didn't care. I took that risk. It was not illegal for me to do. It was just against their policy. So that's between you and your employer, and that obviously is completely up to you whether or not you want to break that policy, because it could mean your job. And I was willing to take that risk. It was unloaded and locked. It was actually double locked. It was in a container that was locked, and then it was in a drawer that was locked. That's an option. But again, I think the important point I want to make is you have to determine whether or not it's legal or just policy. What are your thoughts, Dakota?
Yeah, I think if it is just policy, you have to decide, with your family. I don't know your situation, if you've got kids, if you've got a spouse, but decide as a family unit, can we afford for me to lose my job? And if so, for how long? Do we have 6 months of savings? Do we have 10 months of savings? Do we have 2 years of savings? What does that look like for us? Like logistically, can we still pay our mortgage or make our rent payment? Because I think a lot of times in the gun industry, we just kind of, we push this thing of carry a gun wherever it's legal. But sometimes those policies, they can result in you getting fired. And that could be a huge life-changing event for you, right? If you need your income, maybe you're paycheck to paycheck or just barely not paycheck to paycheck, I think it's a really high risk thing to do, because it's not just if you need to use your gun that you could get caught. You could get caught if somebody at work knows that you're a shooter and mentions to HR, like, hey, I think that person might carry a gun at work. I actually know somebody in Texas who had something like that happen. People in his workplace knew he was a shooter, and it got elevated to management, and they searched his stuff and they found a gun and they fired him for that. So he didn't even need to use his gun at work. He got fired because he had it there. And then we also can think about things like, medical emergencies, or if there's, a situation where you faint and EMS takes you out, EMS might find it and that gets back to your employer. So it's not just that if you need it, you're going to be happy you had it. You could get caught and get fired even if you end up not needing to use your firearm at work. So just be sure you're confident with the decision you make.
Absolutely. And the other part of this is the inside the waistband thing. It sounds like you can't carry the way you normally would carry when you're out and about because you're a welder, I think is what you're getting at there. There are, there are off-body options. There are, bags and cases or whatever that don't look like gun cases that you could carry. There's, I think the way I had mine, it was locked. It looked like a planner, like a calendar or a planner, like a daily planner. But it was actually a gun case. So there are incognito ways or less obvious ways to carry off body. It's tough to say. If you have a backpack, there are backpacks out there that have, little gun nooks and crannies, that are designed for that or whatever. But just make sure that if you're carrying off body, that you make sure that your whatever you're carrying, whatever container off body you're carrying, is always under your control.
Yeah.
If you have to assume that if you're not in control of that bag, or it's out of your sight for even a second, that someone's going to rifle through the whole thing. And if they find a gun, if they steal a gun, if they report you for having a gun, I mean, that could be all kinds of bad things. So,
yeah.
So I guess our advice is, decide whether or not it's legal or just policy. Decide whether or not the consequences are something that you can handle. And then if it's a matter of you just simply can't carry the way you normally would carry, then there are other off-body options that you can use. So, okay, next question. Somebody wrote in and said, I want to start helping new shooters. Great. What are some ways to make sure they have a great experience? Good question.
This is a good one.
It is. And Dakota, I'm going to let you handle it. But before, I want to say, if you really want to help new shooters, and you really want to introduce people to the gun sports who have no experience, check out our shooting socials. We have a lot of opportunities for you to come and teach. We have a waiting list for people who want to have a first-time shooting experience. But in general, I think you have some good advice on this, don't you, Dakota?
Yeah. So I think this is a twofold situation, right? This could be a situation where you have a friend who has absolutely no shooting experience and you're giving them their first experience ever. In that case, I think it's really important that they know the safety rules ahead of time. Nobody wants to show up at the range and be worried that they're breaking the rules or they're doing something wrong. So I think first things first, explain the 4 rules of gun safety, help them get comfortable with whatever gun you're going to let them borrow with like dry fire at home, right? So set up a safe shooting, a safe dry fire area where you've removed all ammunition, all magazines, and you're just teaching them how to lock back their slide, how to make sure the firearm is unloaded, how to load it. And then that way they can come into the range where it's going to be loud and busy and it's going to be a lot of new, feelings for them being on the range for the first time. They're coming into that experience already knowing kind of the basics of how to use this thing, and you're not having to yell over all the gunfire and stuff. So I would just give them a good foundation outside of the range before you even walk in. The next thing would be having electronic ear protection, right? Because that helps so much. They can hear what you're saying without having to yell or having to keep asking, wait, what? Say that again. So that's super helpful. And then if there's any loud guns on the range, you can always have them double up with foam in ear protection. So they could put the foamies in first, then the electronic ear pro over top. And that can just go a long way to making sure that they can hear you and they're not feeling, worried with all the noise or it's not scaring them. And then if your range is particularly loud, maybe you're on a range that allows rifles and shotguns also, I would just call the range ahead of time and say, hey, can you tell me what time or what day of the week is slowest so that we have the best opportunity to have a quiet area. I think for a lot of new shooters, the loud rifles and the loud shotguns can really impact their willingness to have a good experience, right? They're already so tense and concerned about shooting a gun for the first time. The extra noise just kind of dampens that experience for them. So yeah, I think just, giving them a good foundation up front, making sure they have good eye and ear protection, nothing that's going to give them a headache, that everything fits them properly, and then try to get a spot on the range that's a little bit quieter. Maybe a pistol only range would be a good option, like the one down at Discount Gun Mart on Marina Boulevard. But yeah, awesome. I think those are kind of the foundational things I would mention. There's, of course, lots of opportunities for you to have somebody take a class. But since we're talking more about you giving someone a good first experience, if you only have firearms that are, higher calibers, I would rent a gun from the range you go to. You could rent a 22, you could rent a full-size 9mm, but we don't want to be starting out somebody who's brand new to shooting on a small revolver or on a firearm that has a lot of recoil. We want to give them the best opportunity to have a good experience. So that's going to be, full-size guns, 22s, 9mm, if that's what you've got. But definitely utilize the range rental programs to give them something that will help them have that good experience.
Yeah, I don't think people really fully understand how used to gunfire they are. Mm-hmm. If you've been a shooter for a while, and how jarring gunfire can be on your first day.
Yeah.
So even if you like, well, hey, I'm going to start them on a 22 and move them to a 9mm, and then by the end we're going to have them shoot a 44 Magnum. Skip the 44 Magnum.
Yeah.
I've never seen that go well.
No, and not just from like a good experience standpoint, but from a safety standpoint. If the person who is shooting feels like they're doing something that they're not capable of doing, they feel like they're doing something unsafe. And just that feeling of not being a safe person with a gun in their hands is enough to make them think, I don't want to shoot again. I think a lot of people don't realize what a big deal it is to be entrusted to be that first person who gives someone their range experience, because you're holding the power as that friend who's bringing them to their first ever shooting social or their first ever shooting experience. You have the power to make or break that experience for them. And I have so many women who come through my classes who have that story of, I went shooting with a friend, I hated it, I was scared of it for 20 years, but now I'm ready to try again. So be that friend that gives them that first good experience so that they want to keep coming back and training.
Good advice. Awesome. All right, let's go to our lawsuit segment, talk about lawsuits and some of the bills that are being introduced. We actually have some big news on this one.
This segment is our legal and legislative segment where we tell you what you need to know from the courts and from the legislators. But remember, I am not a lawyer and Mike is not a lawyer. We are not giving you legal advice, and all legal advice should come from a properly licensed California lawyer. Our sponsor, John Dillon, is a lawyer. John has been helping more and more people fight GVROs. Those are the gun violence restraining orders. If you know somebody that's had their self-defense rights taken away without due process, give John a call. His website is dillonlawgp.com, and his phone number is 760-642-7150.
So you want to defend yourself. You want to protect your loved ones from being violently attacked, but there's one problem. California says you have to pass a test first. Let's talk about what I mean. So AB 1187, it's being introduced. It's a bill right now that will eventually be voted on, probably, and it's going to force Californians to pass a test and pay a fee before you can exercise your fundamental right to keep and bear arms, basically your fundamental right to self-defense. But I know you're probably thinking, but Mike, don't they already do that? It's called a firearm safety certificate. Yes, but what they're doing is much, much worse. You know, the firearm safety certificate, basically you pass a written test and then boom, you can purchase a firearm. And it's really, it's a hassle, but I've never heard of anybody. It doesn't really prevent people from purchasing a firearm. It just educates them a little bit beforehand. So has it really been an infringement on your Second Amendment? Well, I think it's debatable. What's not debatable is AB 1187, and the changes that they're making is definitely an infringement on your Second Amendment rights.
Yes.
It was introduced by former San Fernando City Council member and current Assembly Democrat. Her name's Celeste Rodriguez. And I just like to point that out, that she started out on a city council. So this could have been prevented with a little bit of effort, at a local level, which is exactly what San Diego County Gun Owners and Orange County Gun Owners and Inland Empire Gun Owners tries to do. It completely rewrites what an FSC, a firearm safety certificate, is, and it amps it way up. There are new requirements, there's new training, there's new fees. So what exactly, we want to get into talk about exactly some of the details here. So who does this actually apply to? Well, it's going to apply to anybody who moves into California. So if you're moving into California for whatever reason, maybe you're getting stationed here in the military, maybe you've just taken a job here in the civilian world, whatever. If you're moving to California and you're bringing a gun, you have 60 days from the time you actually enter California to do all these requirements to get this brand new card. Which, by the way, you have 60 days because you only have 60 days to register all your guns. When you get to California, a lot of people don't realize this. If you're bringing guns into California, California state law says that you only have 60 days to register them all. So that's why you have to have this. It'll be this new amped up card. It hasn't passed yet. This bill hasn't passed yet, but this new amped up firearm safety cert with all these new requirements. It also applies to anybody buying a gun. So even if you already own 10 guns and you're going to go buy a new gun, you're going to have to go through these hoops, jump through these hoops, and do all the things that are required, which we'll talk about in just a minute. And that is whether you're buying from a dealer or you're doing a private party transfer. It doesn't matter. If you're purchasing a firearm, you're going to have to go through all this. And anyone that takes possession of a gun, so if you inherit a gun, someone gives you a gun as a gift, something like that, if there's any kind of transfer of ownership of a firearm in California, it looks like you're going to have to go through all these hoops, these horrible anti-Second Amendment, unconstitutional hoops. So let's talk about exactly what is required. Dakota, have you read this? Did you look into this?
Yeah, I did. It's very far-reaching. Essentially, they're saying that the new FSC would require an 8-hour training course with at least 1 hour of shooting.
Yep. So 8-hour course. So this is just to purchase a gun or to just take possession of a gun. I want to emphasize, you're not getting your CCW. We're not talking about that. So just to get a gun, it's an 8-hour course that would require live fire. By the way, if passed, this will take effect July 1st, 2027. It hasn't passed yet, but if passed, that's when it'll actually take effect.
That's actually a longer amount of shooting than you have to for your CCW right now. 1 hour is not the requirement for the CCW. For the CCW, it's 100 rounds. That's the minimum requirement. You can do that in under an hour. Yeah. So this is more stringent than the current CCW
the carry
rules.
permit. Don't say that too loud. You might give them some ideas about the training shall include. So they actually spell out exactly what you have to learn in this training. Federal and state laws related to possession, transportation, and storage of firearms, the importance of secure storage to prevent unauthorized access and use of firearms, safe firearm handling, and fundamentals of shooting firearms, the risks of firearms and causes of accidents. So the risks of firearms is political speak for firearms are bad and evil and they hurt people. They don't help people, by the way. This is pure propaganda. How to legally relinquish or transfer a firearm. That's interesting. State laws pertaining to self-defense and techniques for conflict resolution. And then they also have a section on mental health, suicide prevention, and domestic violence issues associated with firearms and firearms violence. I got to tell you, the reality is, and Dakota, I think you agree with me. Let me know. All these things are things that, if you're a responsible firearms owner, you should make sure that you're educated in all these areas.
Yeah.
You should take a class, that educates yourself on all these, and make sure that you at least have a general understanding of all these topics. It's extremely important. But the point is they're mandating this. They're codifying that you have to have this in order to exercise your right to self-defense. And that doesn't exist anywhere else. To write a blog, you don't have to, take a test on grammar, or, you don't have to be educated on hate speech or whatever. To exercise, your religion. You don't have to pass a test first before you can be considered, someone who can, pray to your God, and that's why this is so truly offensive and why ultimately I think it's going to be considered unconstitutional. But that's the training requirement. Anything else stand out? I think we covered everything in the training.
I mean, yeah, the training requirement itself, like Mike was saying, I completely agree with you, generally speaking, that we want gun owners to take it into their own hands to get educated, 100%. But we don't want the government to mandate it. There's a lot of reasons why I'm against government mandated training. But just to name a couple quickly, one is it's basically putting a price tag on your rights, right? This class is not going to be free. The government is not going to subsidize this class. This is going to be a class you have to pay for at an FFL or at a shooting range to take. And we are assuming that not everybody, I think I can confidently say that not everybody has the extra $200 or $300 or whatever this class is going to take when they're buying their first firearm. Or if you're not even planning on using a firearm, but you're inheriting one, or your husband gives you one as a gift or whatnot, you want to be able to decide when you want to train. You don't want to be forced into that, to get pressed into training as soon as you come into possession of it. So I'm against it for a lot of reasons, but the financial aspect should not be overlooked here. This is going to directly impact people who are in lower socioeconomic status areas that don't have the time that they can take off of work or off of their family life. This is going to impact single mothers who can't afford a babysitter and an 8-hour class. So for lots of reasons, I'm against it, but that's one that just really stands out to me. This is going to directly impact the people who need firearms and protection of the protection that firearms bring us in our homes the most.
Yeah, there's no way you're getting through a class. Like, this is hundreds of dollars.
Yeah.
This is hundreds of dollars, on top of the 11% tax that you paid for your firearm. You're getting into, whereas right now you can pretty much own a firearm for hundreds, and
Yep.
this is getting into thousands.
Right. At least doubling your cost just to purchase the firearm, right? Because you could get a very affordable gun for a couple $100. This class on top of that's going to be another couple $100.
And the financial aspect, absolutely important. And then the fact that this is curriculum. So it's the instructor has to be Department of Justice certified, and the curriculum has to be government approved. And I mean, it's just propaganda. I don't, it's offensive to me that the government is going to tell me what they think I need to know about exercising my right, any of my rights. That's offensive. It would be unthinkable to do this in any other category. Your right to, press, your right to gather and assemble, your right to religion, free speech, all that, completely unthinkable that you'd have to go through government propaganda before you could do any of that. So what's next? So it's got to pass. There's a bunch of committees it's going to have to go through. And then, of course, it's voted on by the entire assembly, and then the entire Senate. Of course, it has to be signed by the governor. And again, I want to emphasize this could have been prevented back when she was a city council member, and that is exactly what we focus on. An ounce of prevention is, rather than the 150 pounds of cure, which is the lawsuit that's probably going to have to address this. Now that it's being, it's going to get turned from bill into law. Not much we can do once it's up in Sacramento. We make the phone calls, send the emails, do the stuff. But the reality is this is probably going to have to be litigated. So another federal Second Amendment victory, albeit small, it's an important message to the public. I can't really emphasize how important messaging is, to culture. When you have an elected official who is saying something good or bad about something, it has an effect. And too often elected officials push their anti-gun message. One of the things I really hated about having Obama as president is anytime there was some kind of, horrible tragedy, he would use that as an opportunity to advance his anti-gun agenda. I absolutely hated that. He would, rather than, talk about what was going on, he would talk about what kind of laws we could push in order to limit your Second Amendment rights, as a result of being in a very emotional state because of a horrible tragedy. So they do it after a tragedy. They do it to prove a point, and it definitely has an effect on culture. Well, the Department of Health and Human Services just deleted a Biden-era Surgeon General advisory declaring that the Second Amendment is a public health crisis. So if you now click on this is the page. You can see it on your screen, page not found. Now, is it a small victory? It's a small victory, but I love it. It's absolutely great. Biden was a horrible Second Amendment president. Had he gotten another term, it would have continued to be horrible. But fortunately, Trump is undoing a lot of the Biden era anti-Second Amendment stuff, and I wanted to call that to your attention. Is the California magazine ban now in full effect? CRPA's Duncan versus Becerra lawsuit unfortunately failed. But are you now a felon? Well, let's get into it. Duncan versus Becerra is the lawsuit, and there is now a final judgment that's been published. So what exactly happened? Well, this lawsuit, if you're not familiar, Duncan versus Becerra was a lawsuit against the ban on possessing magazines. It was really already in existence. There was a ban on buying and selling, importing, taking possession of a magazine that held more than 10 rounds. And then the state of California put into law a ban on even possessing these magazines. So there was a lawsuit filed, and everybody remembers this is how we discovered Judge Benitez, Saint Benitez, because he came out with an extremely strong ruling that said, no way, a magazine ban like this is completely unconstitutional. And then we had Freedom Week. Now, if you owned a magazine, whether you purchased it that week or you already owned it, if you had a magazine during Freedom Week that held more than 30 rounds, Judge Benitez exempted you. Said, okay, you're still okay. You can own these. Again, whether you purchased it, whether you already owned it, whatever. If you had this magazine during Freedom Week, he said, okay, I'm going to put a stay on my order, meaning that his order wasn't in effect yet. Okay. But if you already owned these magazines, if you possess them, then you're good to go. So if you had magazines that held more than 10 rounds because of that order, they were totally legal. Well, what happened was that just this last week, the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals had an en banc panel, which means that they had 11 judges look at this and evaluate it. And it had been there for a while. They were really, really stalling on this, which we thought was good news. But now they've come out with the final ruling, and the final ruling says that the ban on possessing, on buying, on selling, on importing magazines that hold more than 10 rounds comports, that was the actual word that they used, with the Second Amendment and the Bruen decision, which is just absolutely ridiculous. And we're going to talk about why. One of the judges that ruled against your rights, Judge Susan Graber, said, quote, "A large capacity magazine has little function in armed self-defense, but its use by mass shooters has exacerbated the harm of those horrific events. Murderers who use large capacity magazines need not pause between shots until they have fired 20, 30, or even 100 rounds. These pauses are crucial. Victims and law enforcement personnel take advantage of short pauses in firing to flee, take cover, and fight back. A mass shooter's use of large capacity magazines limits those precious opportunities." I don't understand how she doesn't see the other side of that. That, you know, that also works when you're defending yourself. And in fact, people defend themselves with firearms far more than, crime is committed using firearms. But that was part of her reasoning.
I'd also just like to point out that that is just not true. Murderers who use large capacity magazines need not pause between shots until they have fired 20, 30, or even 100 rounds, is her direct quote. Find me a single mass shooting incident where a mass shooter fired 20, 30, or 100 rounds without pausing. It does not happen. That is not a thing. Mass shooters consistently have malfunctions. They have bad guns. They don't know how to use their guns. They stole their guns from their dad or their grandpa or whatever. Very, very frequently, they have absolutely no idea how to shoot their gun. They have malfunctions at a very high rate. We see it in CCTV footage. We see it in body cam footage from police response. There are consistently issues feeding rounds into their firearms, no matter what kind of gun they're using, what kind of magazines they're using. I do not think that there is a single mass shooting incident that has ever happened where there were 100 rounds fired without a pause.
Yeah, I can't even think of one where I can't think of a single, mass murder where a gun was involved where the person was stopped because they were changing a magazine. The other thing is, if we're relying on a criminal's inability to quickly change their magazine, for public safety,
we've got a bigger problem.
It's just
That's
ridiculous.
a giant issue. Yeah, I mean, I do think there are some cases. We've seen some cases where children recognize. I think there was a maybe even at Sandy Hook, I might be misspeaking, but there was a kid who recognized, oh, this is a magazine change, because he had been shooting with his family before, and he got some of his buddies and they all left the classroom, and they were the only kids that didn't get killed in that classroom. So I do think there's benefits here to, obviously people needing to reload their gun while they're committing crimes. That's good that they have to reload their gun. But what does this have to do with legal firearms owners using firearms for self-defense or for recreation or for any other, reason we want to use our firearms? The concept here that banning high-capacity magazines will stop mass shooters or will lessen the deaths that occur from mass shootings is just preposterous. They don't even generally own their firearms legally. Why can't we just... There's already laws on the books for all of these things. Murder is already illegal. Why are you just going to add another level of difficulty for law-abiding gun owners?
Well, we have to understand that the judges who ruled on this and wrote the decision, and by the way, only 3 of the 11 judges dissented, and we'll talk about that in just a minute. This isn't logical. They weren't making a logical argument. That wasn't their intent or their purpose. What they did is they actually twisted and turned the Bruen decision and kind of shoved it back in the Supreme Court's face.
Yeah.
I mean, it really, truly, it's not hyperbole to say that they kind of, gave the middle finger to the Supreme Court and said, hey, we're going to use your text, history, and tradition test against you and, shove it right in your face. Basically, we're going to rule against what you were intending and what the Second Amendment intended and what the framers intended, and we're going to shove it right in your face. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, one of the things in the decision against us was they said that the text of the Second Amendment doesn't say that it's legal for people to own magazines that hold more than 10 rounds. They were saying, hey, if you say we got to go by text, well, there's no text in the Second Amendment that says anything about magazines that hold more than 10 rounds. That is the most obnoxious, ridiculous, legal-minded excuse for a decision I think I've ever seen. I mean, it really truly is. This isn't her understanding or their understanding, the multiple judges. This isn't their understanding of the Bruen decision. This isn't their understanding of the Second Amendment. This isn't a sincere effort to comply with the Bruen decision or follow the Second Amendment. This is absolutely a middle finger to the Supreme Court. It says the U.S. has a tradition of gun regulation, so they're actually putting language in there, again, to use text, history, and tradition against us, to twist it and turn it around. Nobody out there, there's not a single person out there that says, hey, you know what, that Bruen decision, that is definitely, I'm glad that's in place because now it's easier for us to ban firearms and firearms parts. Nobody thinks that. They absolutely had to make this up. It's totally delusional, and they aren't judges, they're activists. The dissent, in this case, we're the dissent. The good guys are the dissent. They're the ones that, because the majority of the ones that wanted to take your rights away, the dissent are the ones that wanted to make sure that your rights were preserved. And I wanted to read just a little bit from a part of the dissent. Magazines are arms. Magazines, whether they hold 10 rounds, more than 10 rounds, or fewer than 10 rounds, are unquestionably arms under the Second Amendment. As a textual matter, arms include any weapons of offense or armor of defense or anything that a man wears for his defense or takes into his hands or useth in wrath to cast at or strike another. That is carried for the purpose of offensive or defensive action. And that, of course, they're talking about, they're actually referencing Heller in the dissent. Arms then extend prima facie to all instruments that constitute bearable arms, even those that were not in existence at the time of the founding. At a minimum, the meaning of arms, quote, covers modern instruments that facilitate armed self-defense, which is directly from the Bruen decision. So there was a lot of discussion, and then you can talk about, by the way, what a magazine is. A magazine is a container, possibly detachable, and a repeating rifle or machine gun, etc., containing a supply of cartridges, which are fed automatically. They kind of talk about the actual definition of it. But there was a lot of discussion over whether or not a magazine is a necessary part in a firearm or an accessory. And it was basically made clear that is the only type of magazine that can't be banned would be a single shot magazine. That anything over single shot, if it held 2 or more rounds, then it was simply an accessory. It wasn't a necessary part of the firearm, which is absolutely ludicrous. Absolutely ludicrous. Now, Van Dyke, right? Is the name of the judge? Judge Van Dyke. He put up about an 18-minute video that was a dissent, and basically explaining how firearms worked because he knows what he's talking about. Did you watch the video?
Not the whole 18 minutes, but I saw pieces of it.
He legitimately seems to be a firearms guy who understands what firearms are all about and the way they function. And he did a really good job. But the reality is, we frequently make this mistake where we're looking at this ludicrous decision and we're trying to apply logic to it.
I know.
And it's not logical. Like you said, this wasn't an honest effort to get this right. This was, mental and legal gymnastics. And again, using the Supreme Court's decision against them. They clearly don't agree. And this was kind of kind of a snotty response, really.
Yeah, you know what's interesting about this too is that there's still exemptions for law enforcement, active and retired, and there's also exemptions for security guards of armored vehicles. Well, if those people need high capacity or standard capacity magazines in order to do their jobs well, and armed citizens with concealed carry permits are often needing their guns for similar things, wouldn't it be the logical thing to assume that all of those parties could use and benefit from standard capacity magazines?
Well, in the Constitution, especially the Bill of Rights, that is a limit on government. So anytime a judge, an activist judge, like in this case, gives the government more rights, than the citizens, they're completely way off base. There is no justification to be made that, hey, you know what? The government has a little bit more freedom with their speech than citizens do. Or,
right.
Hey, you know what? The government, they're allowed to, practice religion or assemble or whatever.
Yeah.
Any time that they say, hey, your government has more rights than you are, which is exactly what law enforcement are, that is your government. You're completely and totally wrong. So let's talk about what happens. Supreme Court, maybe, I got to tell you, highly unlikely. I mean, in our 249-year history, we've had 4 Second Amendment cases that have gone to the Supreme Court. Even if it makes it, it's still highly unlikely. I mean, it's just highly unlikely that this case is going to actually make it. I mean, lightning could strike too, right? Just to give you some context, in the history of the U.S., the Supreme Court has seen around 26,000 cases. They see about 60 to 80 cases per year in modern times. Meanwhile, thousands of people want them to see their case. Could it go? It could go. It could absolutely go. Will it go? I got to tell you, it's just unlikely. I mean, just the numbers and the history just don't quite support it. But who knows? Who knows what will happen? Maybe the Supreme. I got to tell you, in politics these days, nothing would surprise me. I don't think this is something we can count on, though. I don't think we can absolutely count on the Duncan case going to the Supreme Court. Even if it does, it's not happening today or tomorrow. It's not, happening anytime soon. Again, if it does, what a miracle, But trying to rely on miracles, that's just not the way to go. So what does this mean? Even if the Supreme Court eventually does rule on this, what does this mean for your magazines? Well, the reality is, so right now you don't have to do anything. Don't do anything. If you have magazines that hold more than 10 rounds, just sit tight. What's going to happen is that this decision gets kicked back down to the district. The district, then puts out an order. That takes a little bit of time. And then from there, it'll be clear on exactly what'll have to happen when it comes to magazines that hold more than 10 rounds.
Yeah.
Could they still grandfather in the Freedom Week? I think that's highly unlikely at this point. At some point, I think the most likely scenario, if I'm looking in my crystal ball, is that magazines that hold more than 10 rounds are going to be illegal to buy. They're going to be illegal to sell. They're going to be illegal to gift. You can't give it to somebody else. And they're going to be illegal to possess no matter when you possess them, no matter what date. You're just going to be a grandfather clause. Yeah. At some point, you're going to have to make a decision on what you're going to do with your normal capacity magazines that hold more than 10 rounds.
Well, you actually don't have to decide because they decided for you. They gave you 4 choices. You can remove it from the state. You can sell it to a licensed dealer. You can turn it in to law enforcement for destruction. Or you can permanently alter it so that it can accept no more than 10 rounds.
Yeah, but we don't know. Not today. Just hold on. Yeah. Hold off. Not today. Wait until the actual order comes down. But yes, they absolutely. Those I believe at some point will eventually be your options. But don't do anything yet. Just sit tight. I'm not an attorney. This is not legal advice. So just sit tight and wait for the actual order to come out. But again, this is. We have to understand lawsuits are important, but we can't rely on them, and it's not the only arrow in our quiver. We have to get the right people elected. At this point, I think it's equally as likely that we get this law reversed by Sacramento as it is that the Supreme Court steps in and reverses it, through a lawsuit. So it's important to get the right people elected. It's important to focus on activism, making sure that you're helping people get elected, that you're helping people get more involved, and we're here to help you do that. So, unfortunately, and there, by the way, one of the factors that does weigh into whether or not the Supreme Court will take it is, and it's kind of an interesting point, is, this en banc, I don't know if you remember, but during the process and procedure, at some point, the Ninth Circuit said, you know what, we're just going to take this case to an en banc, to an 11-judge panel. We'll take it. Skip the process. We're just going to take it and we'll decide. There's a lot of discussion on whether or not they even had jurisdiction, whether they were even legally allowed to do that. There's very distinct possibility that the Ninth Circuit screwed up and that this could be, at the very least, delayed and done over, but at most this could be completely wiped off the books. I think more likely scenario is that it would be, it'd be a do-over, but still that's another reason that this could get reviewed by the Supreme Court. But we cannot just rely on that. We have to get back to good old-fashioned activism, getting the right people elected, raising money, spending time, getting people involved, and doing the things that effective activism can get you. So stay tuned. When the order comes, you'll know, keep in touch with Gun Owners Radio. Make sure that you're following us and subscribe, and we'll make sure to let you know when things happen. I wish this had gone better, and I wish I had better news for you. All right. I think that's all you need to know.
Okay, that is our legal and legislative segment.
Okay. Being in a self-defense incident is probably the most traumatic thing that can happen to a person. Likewise, if somebody has been injured in a defensive gun use, or a DGU, or any other kind of accident, they need immediate care. And if your mind isn't prepared, you can freeze, delaying crucial seconds that can mean life or death. So we encourage people to get as much training as they can, but strategic operations does something a little different with their hyper-realistic training. And we're going to talk to Wyatt Sabo about that next. But first, wanted to remind you that this segment is sponsored by our friends at Cargo, cases and rugged gear outfitters in El Cajon. Go to cargostores.com or visit them at 423 Broadway in El Cajon. If you need to protect your gear while you're on the go, look no further. Cargo has the perfect case for you. So if you need it protected, if you want it customized, Cargo is the place to go. Use code GOR to get 10% off their website, or mention Gun Owners Radio or San Diego County Gun Owners at their store, and you'll get 10% off there. If you're a manufacturer, they do customized branded cases for business too, so check them out. Wonderful shop, wonderful store, great supporters. Check out Cargo. Go to their shop or check out their website today. Wyatt, how you doing, man?
Good morning. How are you?
Good morning. Great, doing well. So, strategic operations, you guys have a heck of a program, a very hyper-realistic program to teach first aid from basic to advanced, right? You tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so we're a NAEMT training center. We're a California Post presenter. We offer a wide variety of different medical training classes. We start at the basic 2-hour stop to bleed class, where you learn about tourniquets and wound packing and calling for help. And then we have 1-day courses for law enforcement and innocent bystanders and first responders, security guards. It's called our TECC LEO class, Tactical Emergency Casualty Care for law enforcement officers. That's a 1-day course. That's post approved. And approved by
can anybody take that class, or do you have to be law enforcement?
Anybody can take that class. If you do have EMT or above, you'll get 8 hours of CEs. If you're a law enforcement, you'll get 9 credit CPTs from California Post, and anybody can take that. We also have a 2-day TECC provider course, and that course is geared for like EMTs, firefighters, tactical medics. Anyone else can take that course as well. That's a 16-hour, 2-day course, and that's open enrollment. We also have a 5-day SWAT medic course that we run twice a year, and that's approved by Post and NAEMT. That's a 40-hour course. And we have a whole different types of custom courses that we can run for different customers and clients.
That's awesome. Now, what do you think the advantage of a civilian, especially? I mean, law enforcement, it's real obvious, why they would need, this level of first aid. But what do you see as far as civilians? What kind of civilians normally take this kind of class?
So we have range safety officers, executive protection, lifeguards, nurses, security guards at hospitals and schools, school resource officers, people who work at gun ranges, people that work at festivals or at Petco Park, any large venue where you want to make a difference and you could help someone that gets injured, because trauma can happen anywhere. It's not always going to be a gunshot, right? It could be a car accident, natural disaster, a kitchen accident, a car accident. It could be, a stabbing. It's not always going to be a gunshot that causes trauma. And the most important thing is stopping bleeding. So we can teach anybody all the different techniques and interventions to, control hemorrhage.
If you were going to recommend like a pipeline of classes that you guys offer, what would be kind of the first step for somebody who has absolutely no medical experience, and then like the order of classes that somebody would want to take to get comfortable and confident?
Great question. So the first step would be taking that 1-day course that we have, the TECC Leo. They will learn 7 interventions and skills during that course. And it could be the March assessment. That's a patient assessment. They could learn tourniquets, wound packing, bandaging, how to properly do lifts, drags, and carries to move a patient, calling for help, doing a basic airway assessment. So you don't have to have any medical background, but that would be the step 1, taking that 1-day class.
Awesome.
And
so
then,
that sounds like it covers like stop the bleed and maybe CPR, other things like that.
Yeah, it's
Awesome.
it's definitely designating between if it's dangerous, is there a threat? Is it a hot zone or a warm zone? And then once the threat's been taken care of, then we could go into patient care and taking care of patients and controlling hemorrhage, calling for help, doing assessments.
What do you think's the most? What's the biggest or most common mistake that untrained folks do when there's an emergency situation?
So the biggest mistake with tourniquets is putting the tourniquet on too loosely before they start to tighten the windlass. That's the most common tourniquet mistake nationwide. So it's about learning the anatomy, putting the tourniquet on high and tight, making sure that it's snug above the injury. Once it's snug and tight, then you start twisting to have that second action of compressing the blood vessel. So that's the number one biggest mistake.
And the
Another
process
mistake is
before we go on to the second one regarding tourniquets, the process and procedure, the way people have been taught to use tourniquets has changed drastically in the past 35 years. I learned how to put on tourniquets in the late 80s, and the instruction then was only use a tourniquet if you know that person is going to lose their limb. And that's not true anymore, right? They've had a lot more experience with tourniquets and how to use them. That doesn't seem to be the guidance anymore.
Yeah, now after lots of studies, lots of conflicts with, Iraq, Afghanistan, a lot of money going into research and improving techniques and the March assessment. So the number one most important thing is stopping bleeding, because average adults have 5 to 6 liters of blood. So putting the tourniquet on is that first resort, not that last resort anymore. They changed that, quite some time ago, 20 years ago.
People don't realize how quickly you can bleed out. It's, shocking the first time you watch a video or, you think about the actual quantity of blood you have and how little you have to lose to actually bleed out, how little time you have. So I think, stopping the bleeding is a great first step. You were going to mention a second mistake that you see people make.
It's with the wound packing. So when you are packing a wound, getting the gauze directly on the active source of bleeding inside the injury or the void space, that's a huge mistake as well. So people they'll start packing the hole, but they're not actually going to where the blood vessel is, where the bleeding is coming from. That's a huge mistake as well with the wound packing.
And it sounds like your classes, do you think, to take that first 1 day class that you mentioned, it sounds like it's more than just, Band-Aids, but it gets fairly advanced. I don't know if maybe that's the right word exactly, but what would you tell somebody who really wants to learn true first aid? They really want to be able to save somebody in case of an emergency, but they're intimidated. How, should someone be intimidated if they have no experience at all taking this class?
So great question. This 1 day class is made the way they designed it. It's made for anybody can take it. So the first 4 hours are PowerPoints followed by skill stations. And then after lunch, we would practice doing these skills to make sure that the student's comfortable doing the skills on a mannequin or on our role players. And then after they're comfortable, then we go into the trauma lanes and we start actually putting the practice of the march assessment, the tourniquets, wound packing. And then when they're comfortable doing that, that's when we add the stress. So you want to have the knowledge first, practice the skills, make sure they're comfortable with the skills, and then we add the stress to it.
Wow. No, what do you mean add the, what does that mean? How do you add stress to that situation?
So it's called, we have this term called stress inoculation training. So this is when you are practicing medical training or simulation under a stressful environment in a safe training environment. And we can add in the role players that are screaming, the actual makeup and moulage, makeup effects, the sound, the gunshots, the blank rounds, speakers, wow, smoke machines, pyrotechnics. So it's all in a safe training environment. So then when they practice and train under stressful conditions and they learn it, if they ever have a horrible situation that we're hoping never happens, if it does happen, then their brain recalls and remembers how to deal with the stress.
Jeez, that's intense. Have you ever been out, Wyatt, out to dinner, just walking around or shopping or something like that, and had to use these skills, personally, like not on the job or anything like that? You just happen to be out with your family or kids or alone or something like that, and something comes up?
The times that myself and other students and other cadre members have had to use it, I've definitely we've had a few people from October 1 in Vegas. We've had a few customers, car accidents, and we just had one recently with a customer 2 weeks ago. A gentleman fell off a Connex box, split his head open, and they had to do bleeding. So we've had another student that someone was choking on the beach on a barbecue, and they had to clear their airway. So there's been multiple cases of someone learning, using what they learned from one of our classes.
I've had it. So a couple times I've had to use it. What about you, Dakota? Anything?
Yeah, I was the first person on the scene of a rollover freeway accident, and it took over 15 minutes for EMS to show up. So that definitely put my skills to the test and made me want to take a lot more classes. That was like my first experience. But since then, I've seen 2 motorcycle accidents, one that happened where a motorcycle hit my car, but another one that happened where I was just the first one there. And then, things here and there. I was a lifeguard in high school, so yeah, all sorts of poolside problems and slips and trips and choking and things like that. But I think people, especially, we're on Gun Owners Radio, we're talking about a lot of our listeners probably carry guns, but a lot of people don't think about what else should I be carrying to actually save lives. Like if I'm carrying a gun to save my own life or to save my family's life, we're just at much of risk, actually probably more risk of getting in a car accident that requires bleeding control than we are using our firearm. But how many of us have like good kits built out in our cars or carry a tourniquet on our body, So I think what you guys are doing is very, very important.
Yeah, I mean, this stuff really happens, Wyatt, is really what I want to get across to people. As we're talking about it, I can think of at least a half a dozen serious situations I remember I was eating lunch one time at work, years ago, and a lady passed out on the sidewalk. And I was the first person on the scene that knew what they were talking about. Fortunately, an actual professional medic just happened to be passing by, and I let him take over because he was clearly more experienced than I was. Car accidents, all this stuff happens. I think it's pretty tough to get through adulthood without being on the scene of some kind of emergency. And I got to tell you, if you don't know what you're doing, that's a pretty scary feeling,
Yes, that first car accident I stumbled upon was probably the scariest 15 moments of my life to this day, because I had already called it in. The dispatcher had told me, we don't have anyone nearby. It'll be a little bit. And I was like, oh, dang, I'm the adult in the room. Like, I'm the person who's supposed to know things here. And then some other people came that didn't know anything. And so I was like, telling them what to do and stuff. But as soon as EMS got there, I've got to tell you, my whole body started shaking. I was cool, calm, and collected in the moment, doing what needed to be done. And as soon as the real adults got there, I was like, okay, I guess I'm shaky. I need to sit down for a second. But
that's truly.
That stress inoculation training sounds like it would have been helpful there.
Now, Wyatt, you guys have, I don't know, how much do you use? My understanding is you guys have like very realistic, I forget what you call them. Are they called cut suits or something like that?
Yeah, we have multiple products that we use for medical training. We do have a cut suit. It's one of our most famous products. It's a human worn simulator where you can put this cut suit on a role player or a mannequin, and you can do the surgical crike. You could drop needles in their chests. Wow. You could do chest tubes, IVs.
It's like a wetsuit that looks like skin, and someone kind of wears it, right? And then it actually can bleed. And
it's got silicone, and it sits on their chest, and you could put different moulage and wounds on it. That's one of our products. We also have it's our CCRR. It's a Casualty Care Rescue Randy, which we did a collaboration with NASCO. NASCO makes that big heavy rescue Randy that they use for fire and police training. So we actually created this wetsuit that goes over top of a rescue Randy, and it has 4 different bleeds on it. So it has a neck bleed, arm, pelvic, and lower extremity as well. And then we have moulage kits that people can put on, that wearable moulage, so they can have burns, gunshot, penetrating trauma, a closed fracture, open fracture.
What does that mean, moulage? I'm sitting here pretending like I know what that word means. I don't know what that word means.
Moulage is the process of putting on makeup or a wound.
Okay.
For
so
training.
you dress it up to where it looks very realistic, bruises and cuts and whatever. Okay, that's awesome. So, all right, awesome. What else do you want people to know about the classes that you guys offer and the type of training they can get?
Yeah, so on our website, it's just Google strategic operations, and then there'll be a medical tab, and all of our medical classes are there, and our flyers and the dates, the prices, the location, and then there's a email at the bottom, and if they have any questions, they just send us an email, and the whole team gets it. We get multiple phone calls and email inquiries all the time to fill up these classes. The classes are growing. I have a lot of more instructors over the years. There's not enough companies that truly provide great medical training.
And you guys do an awesome job. Your crew and your facility are very awesome. Right in the middle of San Diego, you guys are you're off Ruffin in kind of the Claremont area, just behind the Studio Diner. So you don't even have to travel far. You're right in the heart of San Diego for everybody. Very, very accessible. So, okay, great. Wyatt, thank you so much for joining us. Appreciate all this information. Appreciate everything that you and your crew do. What's the website one more time?
It's Strategic Operations.
Strategic Operations. Awesome. Thanks so much, Wyatt. Appreciate it. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. Thanks for having me again. I appreciate it.
You guys stay safe. Let's talk about deployment. So we were just talking about what you can do as an activist. This segment is brought to you by Red, White, and Badass Brew Coffee. Go to rwbbcoffee.com and use GOR to get 15% off. Again, we need you to be involved. The American experiment is to be the country of the self-governed. Well, it's not a spectator sport. We need you to be involved. So Range Day, some of the ways you can be involved. Range Day, sponsored by Vista Mayor John Franklin, is sold out. So we're going to have a lot of fun. If you missed it, I'm sure there will be more opportunities in the future. But mark your calendars. Second Amendment Comedy Night is coming up, and you'll have an opportunity to buy tickets for that. It's going to be a lot of fun. There's going to be a cocktail hour. Then we're going to have 3 professional comedians. It's going to be right here in San Diego in Claremont. Mark your calendars. It's going to be April 30th. Doors open at 5:30, and it's only going to be $20. It'll be $20. You get to go to this. It'll be a lot of fun. Be a lot of like-minded folks in the room. It'll be great, and it'll be at the end of April. Is going to be Not Me, our women's program. That's going to be our 5-year anniversary, and there's a whole list of things that we're going to be doing that week, classes and educational shoots and all kinds of stuff to talk about and empower women and make sure that they become gun owners. So this is going to cap that off, and we're going to celebrate and have a lot of fun. So mark your calendar and come and join us. Tabletops and shooting socials. Let's pull up the volunteer section of our website. If you're not familiar, go to sdcgo.org/volunteer. That's actually the volunteer website we're looking for, with the list of volunteer opportunities. So there's a link coming up here. Anyway, all kinds of different opportunities. For example, we have our Young Republican Shooting Social. That's coming up, where we're going to teach a group of folks to shoot. That's first time shooting experience. We have all kinds of tabletops. There we go. Upcoming volunteer opportunities. So let's see. By the time you see this, some of these are going to be already done. But the Young Republican Shooting Social on the 5th, we have Guns and Moses. It's actually a Jewish shooting group. Poway Weapons and Gear. You can help their community learn how to shoot, have a first-time shooting experience. A Not Me Shooting Social. Every second Saturday of the month at 8 a.m., we have a shooting social where we get people who want a first-time shooting experience. We pair them up with a mentor. You could be that mentor. So go to sdcgo.org/volunteer. All you got to do is pick an event that works with your calendar, and we'll make sure you get trained. We'll make sure you get taken care of. You're never alone. You'll always be, guided along, and usually get a free t-shirt, which is very, very cool. So get involved, be the change that you want to see. Okay. So one of the other deployment opportunities is if you are a life level member for the NRA, they're having their elections. So for the first time, Gun Owners Radio is actually endorsing people. The NRA is going through a big change, and there are some reform candidates, and we need you to vote for them. So if you didn't get your ballot in your magazine, contact the NRA. You're running out of time. You only have, another couple weeks, I think. Mm-hmm. And we need you to vote for these reform candidates to make sure that all the effective changes that NRA has planned happen. So here's a whole list of them. You can find them on our website. We interviewed Kim Rohde recently. She's excited about the new changes in NRA, and all these other folks are fantastic. So please, 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 if you're an NRA member, vote for them. Or if you just want to, if this is the time that you become a life member, then boom, your first official task will be to vote for the performers. So stay informed, get trained, be part of the community, and we will see you at the next event. All right, let's talk to Sam now. Okay, it's time for everybody's favorite segment, Stump My Nephew. Stump My Nephew is sponsored by Seal One. Seal1.com is their website. Go to seal1.com. Cleaning your gun shouldn't take forever. Seal One makes it faster and easier so you can spend more time on the range or just living your life. And now, what everyone's waiting for, Seal One is finally available in an aerosol can. That means that it's even quicker, easier, no hassle, and you can not just use it to clean your guns, but you can use it to all those, you lubricate all those squeaky, gears and whatnot, window tracks, tools, metal parts, sliding doors. Every place that you would use WD-40, you can now use Seal One in that aerosol can. Thank you so much, Seal One, for sponsoring us. You guys are wonderful. Grab your Seal One product at seal1.com. Okay, Sam, how's it going, bud?
I'm a little under the weather, but I can't complain.
Well, you look like $1 million, my friend.
Thank you.
All right. Dakota's got a question for you. I think you're going to nail this one. I don't usually say that, right? I usually say, I don't know about this one. Blah, blah, blah. I think you're going to nail this one. I think this one's right in your wheelhouse. It was sent in, by the way, Bob from Pacific Beach sent this in, Dakota.
All right. So question from Bob. During World War II, what firearms manufacturer made the fewest M1 Garand rifles?
During World War II, which firearm manufacturer made the fewest M1 Garand rifles? And Bob from where sent that in?
PB, Pacific Beach.
BB from Pacific Beach.
Yep.
Aren't all beaches in California Pacific beaches?
Well, this is a very specific Pacific Beach.
Okay, specific Pacific Beach.
Yeah.
Which U.S. manufacturer made the fewest M1s? M1 rifles, as opposed to M1 carbines, M1 half tracks, M1 pot helmets, M1 submachine guns,
M1 Garand. Yes, they're specifically asking about Garands.
What firearms manufacturer?
Excuse me.
Not what.
Garands. M1 Garands. Sorry.
Oh, what firearms manufacturer? Okay.
Yes.
Ask the question one more time.
During World War II, what firearms manufacturer made the fewest M1 Garand rifles?
There you go.
Ooh, this is actually a tricky one, because I know with 1911s at least, you had a huge number of manufacturers making them, and some only made very, very few. So a bunch of them were made at Springfield, which was the government arsenal at the time. This is actually kind of tricky.
This is the one I thought you were going to get. All right, go ahead. Work it out.
So Springfield made a bunch of them. I know Winchester had production for them, but I don't know how many they made because they had some other rifle projects they were working on at the time. And I don't know what Remington was doing at the time either.
What do you got?
I don't know. Yeah. Man, this is tough. I know this is wrong. I'm just going to say Winchester made no, wait. I'm trying to think, but I know this is wrong. I'm just going to throw out a name. I'm going to say Winchester. I'll say maybe only two firearm manufacturers and a bunch of other stuff manufacturers made them, even though, again, that's probably wrong.
All right. What do you got, Dakota?
Yeah. During World War II, Winchester produced the fewest M1s compared to the other manufacturers, making 513,880 rifles, while Springfield Armory produced significantly more, over 3.5 million. Do you want a more detailed breakdown? We've got one for you.
Go for it. Keep going.
Let's hear it.
They provided a lot of info.
All right. So Winchester produced 513,880, ending production in 1945. Springfield Armory produced slightly more than 3.5 million. During World War II, only two companies, Springfield Armory and Winchester, manufactured the rifle, with Springfield being the original producer and Winchester joining later to meet increased demand. Initially, Springfield was the sole manufacturer. In 1940, Winchester Repeating Arms Company was contracted to manufacture the rifle to meet the growing demand as the war in Europe escalated. Both Springfield and Winchester operated around the clock, producing over 4 million by the end of the war in 1945. Total M1 Garand production, 5.468 million between 1937 and 1957.
There you go, bud. You got it
I
right.
talked myself into it.
Yeah.
You psyched yourself into that one for sure.
I was surprised. I didn't know only two manufacturers were making M1 Garands. I thought it was. I guess M1 carbines had like a dozen or whatever, but M1 Garands.
Yeah, everyone up to and including IBM made M1 carbines. That would be a heck of a collection piece. Put an IBM M1 carbine in your gun safe.
And what was the other? My favorite is Rockola. Do you know what I'm talking about?
No.
Rockola was a manufacturer that made M1 carbines, but they were originally a jukebox manufacturer.
Interesting.
So Rockola jukeboxes were, but you got the machines, you got the labor, boom.
Yeah,
make some carbines.
The whole country came together and a bunch of people became firearm manufacturers.
There you go.
It's fun.
One of the cool things about Springfield Armory, the original Springfield Armory, the company now that is called Springfield Armory has no relation to the original. They bought the intellectual property rights to use the name and the logo in the 70s. I'm talking the Springfield that existed up to the time that it was shut down by Bob McNamara during the Vietnam War. It was an interesting entity because as part of the federal government, it didn't exist just to manufacture arms for the military, though it did do a lot of that. It also existed to figure out things like how to design the tools to manufacture firearms. They were a clearinghouse for all sorts of technical engineering knowledge relating to mass producing long guns, handguns, and ammunition, so that in the event that a war did kick off, they could help other companies start up production on, like, oh, it looks like you're set up with a bunch of lathes, so here are all the schematics you need to produce barrels. We've already figured out how to convert your tooling over. Oh, you're going to produce, trigger groups. Here's how you do it, and so on and so forth. And it was really very important that the U.S. had that capability going into World War II, because we were able to very quickly convert over U.S. domestic industry from making cars and bicycles and jukeboxes and typewriters to making tanks and planes and guns and bombs.
There you go. Yeah. How about that, huh?
Interesting.
He's a wealth of knowledge. What do you got as far as blogs? You got a blog coming up?
I posted up a blog post about, I think, 2 weeks ago called How to Really Read an Executive Order. And in that one, I go into how to read these things with a critical eye. The reason I posted that when I did is as sort of a preamble to talking about actual executive orders, specific ones. And many of you are probably aware of one that the president signed on, I think, his second or third day of this term, about the Second Amendment. And I've seen a lot of people talking about it in media and social media and getting some things wrong about it. So I'd like to go through that. I will go through that in my upcoming blog post this upcoming Monday, with a fine-tooth comb and suss out really, here's what's going on. Here's what it actually covers. Here's what it actually does.
Awesome. Awesome job. Looking forward to it. Always, always, always a pleasure. You do a fantastic job. Some of the best Second Amendment trivia on the internet, thanks to my nephew, Sam, the gunman. So thank you for not stumping my nephew this week. He got the right answer. Winchester did produce the fewest M1 Garens in World War II. So thanks, Sam. See you, buddy. Talk to you next week. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me on, and thank you, everyone, for watching.
Awesome.
It's 11:59 at Gun Owners Radio, and this is the Penn Patriot, music and the truth until dawn. Right now, I've got a few words for some of our brothers and sisters in the occupied zone. The chair is against the wall. The chair is against the wall. John has a long mustache. John has a long mustache. It's 12 o'clock, Americans, and another day closer to victory. And for all of you out there on or behind American lines, this is your song.
That's the best. Our buddy, longtime friend of the show, award-winning journalist John Petrolino, the Penn Patriot. We were going to be talking about something extremely important, some racist gun control policies out of New Jersey, which, by the way, I love the new intro. That was awesome. I'm touched. I'm tickled. I think it's awesome. Thank you so much for doing that.
Absolutely. You could use it to as much as you want. So hello to patriots across America. Hello to people in California. Everyone who is listening, hello. I love you all. And this is the Penn Patriot.
There you go. Okay, so what's going on in New Jersey? We talked a little bit about this a couple of weeks ago. We touched on it, but I really wanted to get into some depth. I mean, the throwing the term racist around is a real serious accusation in this time. I mean, people probably use it a little too willy-nilly, but it's a pretty serious accusation. But from what I've read and what I've seen, it's backed up statistically, it's backed up anecdotally, and it's an extremely serious thing that's happening.
Yeah, and as you know, Michael, this is a story that I've been covering and following for, over a year now, going back to last May. And we discussed this even, when we were at Gun Rights Policy Conference, and I had done a presentation on this. And when I was looking at some data that we got from the Attorney General's office, they put out a permit to carry dashboard that had all of this information that you can go on there and take a look at, who's getting permits, how many denials there are, what people are getting denied for. And don't forget that this is new stuff for New Jersey. Like, we only got carry permits post Bruen. It's not like California where you had carry functionally in a lot of areas, So if you look at all of the Bruen affected states, New Jersey, Maryland, and Hawaii, I think are the three that are really the most effective because culturally we've had no carry for decades. So part of New Jersey's efforts was they released this data dashboard, which I don't understand why they did it, because they did a lot of heavy lifting for us free of charge. And when the dashboard came out, what I first noticed was there was race information missing from that dashboard. So I had put in some Open Public Record Act requests, which is the equivalent of like a FOIA, right? Freedom of Information Act request.
Right.
And they gave me the instructions on how to access the database with the race data. And I was like, I'm not going to say that the data wasn't there, but myself and like a whole bunch of people that were way smarter than me also couldn't find it. So whatever. From there, looked at the data, and we found that blacks were being denied more than double the rate of whites.
Wow.
Okay. Well, people want to say, well, there's more criminal element. There's this, there's that. All right, all stop. What we're going to look at is subjective denial. So there's still a standard on the New Jersey books that's a subjective standard. It's the interest of public health, safety, welfare standard. And a chief of police or an issuing authority can just deny the issuance of a permit on their opinion. No criminal history, and it could be something as simple as they just don't like you.
So okay, so let me pause and clarify, because this is I think if not the crux, an important part of the crux of the situation here, in that it's not just that more people who applied who were black happened to not qualify because there was a criminal history. It's not that. It's that there is a subjective piece where whether or not they have a criminal history or whatever their background is, there is still some authority figure in the bureaucracy that can say, nope, no permit for you. Right?
Correct. And to take it a step further, to even apply for a permit to carry, you have to have a New Jersey firearms owner identification card. And the statutes are nearly identical on the requirements to get the FID card versus the permit to carry. The only real minute differences are you need 2 extra references for a permit to carry, and then you need like the training requirements to be done. But all of the other statutorily defined requirements, such as criminal history, alcoholism, drug use, and this subjective standard is the same. So these are folks that already have their firearms identification cards that went forward and applied for permits to carry, and now you're seeing these denials.
Wow, that's crazy. And you're saying that they had some kind of dashboard or some kind of information center that they put up showing. What do you think they were doing? You think they were bragging, like saying, hey, look, we're issuing, but it ended up backfiring?
I don't know what the idea was. I think maybe they were trying to show regions where people were getting them the most, or and let's be completely above the fold here. At this date now, there's like 50,000 plus permit to carry applications in the state that they had post Bruen. Um, there's, I want to say, under 300 denials. Okay, so that's not a bad denial rate, but when you look at the numbers of who's getting denied and why, right off the bat, more than 50% of the denials are using this subjective standard, which we know from footnote number 9 from Bruen, we're not supposed to be using any subjective standards whatsoever. So right off the bat, everyone is being affected by this. But then when you drill down closer, you're finding that black applicants are being denied at a rate more than 2.5 times white. Now, that's just based on my journalistic number crunching, a non-statistician's, standpoint. And then, as you know, there was a study that was commissioned, and really you should have those guys on to talk about it and explain, their study. I don't want to speak too much for the work that they did, but they saw my reporting and then they commissioned their own study, and they went into each county and then did information requests to get the data with the race attached to it and everything, so they can look at it on a county-wide level. And when they looked at it across the entire state, the data was much worse than what I found. Okay, so I think more than double's pretty bad. Would you agree, Michael?
Yeah, it's bad, but it's kind of inarguable, like when it's that far out of the norm. I don't think there's an argument that can be made that, oh no, gee, this just happens to be a coincidence. I mean, that's pretty tough evidence.
So when these guys did the, adjustment for population, and they used a chi-square methodology to see what the rates are across the entire state of New Jersey, and it's Rise Against Hate. So I want to give these guys the credit because they did the work there, riseagainst.hate.org. And Ben Shore is one of the directors and co-founders there. That was one of the leads on the study. They found the rate to be 10 times more. So black applicants are being denied 10 times more than whites. And then in the county that I'm in, the rate is at like 0. So like, this is a great county to be in. One county over in Ocean County, their rate is 50 times. So black applicants are 50 times more likely to be denied a permit to carry after they've already got a firearms ID card, and based on a subjective standard. We're not talking about criminal history. We're talking about because they don't think it's in the interest of public health, safety, and welfare, and that the applicant lacks the appropriate temperament to possess or carry a gun.
That's unbelievable. Now, in California, the person who would deny based on the old subjective criteria would have been the sheriff. Who is it? Is there someone specific, or is there a panel, or who exactly? What position are they in that they're denying this based on the subjective?
So it's based on jurisdiction. So every person goes to their individual municipality. So I would go to my police chief and my police department in my town. And then if you're in an unincorporated area, you would go to a state police barracks, and the state police barracks would do it. And here's the real kicker. I mean, just not to get off topic, but it's still kind of on topic. I had a guy that was subjectively denied a permit to carry. I was covering his story all of last year as well, for a driving record. And they said, oh, he had a bad driving record, nothing criminal. He was just a bad driver. So he already had a firearms ID card. He already had pistol purchaser permits from his jurisdiction. When he went to apply for a permit to carry, they denied him and it specifically said because of his driving record. You can go look this up because I put all the information in the article. The guy's name was Leonard Mirabel, and they denied him, and they denied him, I think, a second time. And because he was trying to get his permit to be an armored car driver, there's like a specific provision in the law where you could go to the state police. He gets denied by his local jurisdiction, Carlstadt, New Jersey, goes to the state police barracks. Within 2 weeks, they issued him his permit to carry, and it's got the kernel of the police for the state of New Jersey, the head of New Jersey's police signature on there. Granted, it's an auto pen, which we know auto pen being what it might
may or
be.
may not count these days, right?
Yeah, right. But this is how they do the permits in New Jersey. And so he got his permit to carry. And then subsequent to that, he was going to apply for more pistol purchaser permits, and they were going to deny him again. They're like, well, who issued you your permit to carry? I want to talk to them. This is the local police department that were trying to like usurp his rights even further. And eventually he got his pistol purchaser permits issued. I think maybe they ran into my articles on this because I dragged them through the mud. Not that I dragged them through the mud. I just stated the facts.
Yeah, pointed out facts. It's their mud. You know,
exactly.
They're the ones rolling around in their own mud if they're doing this. So there's so much evidence, like clearly statistically, you know, and the fact that they're using this subjective criteria, and the fact that it's varying so much from you know, area to area or municipality to municipality. Clearly, there's something, you know, bad and wonky going on. Is anyone else talking about this, or is it just the gun community?
Not really. And I failed to mention that the other guy with the driving record, English was his second language, and he had some maybe issues when he was applying. I don't want to say that he did, but the Latinos aren't doing very well either with their numbers. It's just there's a large disparity with the black rate. So who else is talking about this? This story, and you know I've been banging this drum for my own reporting since May of last year. With limited exceptions, there's a couple of news outlets that are a little bit smaller in New Jersey that I was able to get coverage on, and Rise Against Hate, they were able to get coverage. And there's a little bit momentum right now as I speak, so I don't want to like bash everyone because there's a couple of outlets that are looking at this story, and there's one that's like really, really big. And it's something that you wouldn't expect to be looking at a topic like this, right? But almost unilaterally across the board, this has been ignored by everyone. The ACLU ignored me. The NAACP ignored me. Black Lives Matter ignored me. Al Sharpton and his group ignored me. Dr. Cornel West ignored me. There's a list I've got, and I'm trying my best to be professional and nice, but I've got a whole list of people that ignored me.
What about now? I get it. It's interesting about the ACLU and about the NAACP and about what about now? You know, the Democratic Party. They're extremely focused in on racial prejudice. So I'm sure that they're all over this, right?
You would be incorrect. So
really,
as you know,
really, they don't care about that. Okay, well, what about the Republican Party? The Republican Party's always telling me how much they care about gun rights. So I'm sure they've been all over this.
There's been some interest from the GOP.
Good.
And right now, most of it is quiet interest, which is fine. And I'll take the quiet interest because that might lead to other things, right? But the Democratic people, when I say quiet, like a quiet interest is like they're interested. I've communicated, or people have communicated with them. The Democrats haven't said anything about this. As a matter of fact, as you know, New Jersey's got a Democratic governor and a Democratic, attorney general. And every time I've reached out to the attorney general about these topics, it's been, we declined to comment. And then also the governor's office has ignored all of my correspondence. And the governor, I wrote to 3 of his press people 3 times each via email. So that's 9 pieces of correspondence, in addition to a snail mail letter that I sent him in the mail. Zero response.
That's crazy. So just cutting to the chase, being crystal clear, you personally think that someone in the chain said, hey, you know what? This person's black, and for that reason alone, we're not going to issue them this permit that they're applying for that has to do with firearms.
I mean, it might have been an internal dialogue, but yeah, I mean, that's what I think. I think you have people with their biases, and this is why we're supposed to have narrow and definite objective standards and not subjective standards.
Well, gun control, nice, rich history of racism when it comes to gun control and gun laws. I've seen in California that the gun laws are disproportionately used against the black and brown community here in California. And I've gotten some interest in that fact, but unfortunately, it's one of those situations where it doesn't seem like there are enough activists who are really truly focused on their issue. Instead, they use their issue to get Democrats elected. So, you know what I mean? In other words, they're not so much, focused on the actual issue of race, but they are focused on using race issues in order to get more Democrats elected. And I'm very proud of Second Amendment activists in that I think better than any other group of activists, we really truly care about our issue, and we make, politicians, no matter what party they're from, prove themselves. We don't just, lay down for the Republican Party or the Democrat Party or the Libertarian Party or the Green Party or anybody. We really truly care about our issue. And it really, really bothers me when, when I see activists who should very much care about this issue, because this is their hot button. This is their whole focus is, race relations, racism, that sort of thing. But when something like this comes up, when it's so clearly racist, but because it has to do with guns, they don't really care. It bothers me to no end.
Yeah, it is true. And I agree with you. And it's, I've gotten, for the most part, from our, we'll say, community, is where I've gotten the most bang for my buck on coverage. So, in talking to you and talking to, Gun for Hire Radio, talking to Armed American Radio. So I've done plenty of press, and I've done plenty of, appearances discussing this very topic, but this has all been people like you and me who are, okay, we're a 2A issue, media, and we're going to cover the 2A, and all the 2A people are really not shying away from it. A handful, a very, very small handful of people that I actually respect have ignored this, but maybe that tells me something more about those guys. I don't know. Maybe they're not exactly what they say they are, but that's a very, very small minority of people that have disappointed me from our community on this. But outside of this world, it's been almost unilaterally ignored with a handful of exceptions.
That's crazy. What else do you want people to know about this, John? What else, is there anything that we need to touch on to clarify?
Well,
I think you've made your case thoroughly, but is there anything else you want to make sure people know?
On this particular topic, no. And honestly, Ben Shore is the guy to really talk to, like getting in depth with. So I hope you guys will invite him on in the future, because he's really got this narrowed down, and he's coming from a very academic standpoint. I'm coming at this as a journalist, right? So our viewpoints are a little bit different. The data is published in Harvard. So we're talking about two different arenas, and these guys did it was peer reviewed as well. So as far as that topic goes, like, I've kind of like handed over the reins, like let these guys handle it now. And I'll cheerlead it on, but like, they've done tremendous work, based off of what I found. It's just, I found it and they ran with it, so that's.
Yeah, this isn't a one and done for us. We talked about it a little bit before. We're talking about it now. I want to continue to talk about this. I know you guys aren't done with it. There's so much more work to be done on this. And I just brought up an email, John. I wanted to get your opinion on it. This just came into me yesterday, and but it's representative of the way a lot of Second Amendment folks are thinking these days, and I wanted you to hear it and then get your thoughts on it. So this guy writes, after Bruen, why should any of us worry about anything? Constitutional carry any way I want, right? Right? How can it be otherwise? And if we give them anything, we're giving up what we already have. I'll volunteer to be arrested and be the one to stand up for us all. Just let me know where and when. And basically, this guy, who wrote this email, wonderful guy, maybe not as engaged as far as what's going on, in the courtroom and other Second Amendment areas. But this attitude is kind of the attitude post Bruen and post Trump election, where Second Amendment advocates are going, "Hey, problem solved. Why do we have to? What's the point of even having a Second Amendment organization anymore? Why do I even have to try? Everything's done with." What are your thoughts on that? And are you seeing it too?
Well, just for the sake of argument, we'll call this individual Mr. Spartacus, and I appreciate your zeal, Mr. Spartacus. Like, you want to volunteer and do this, God bless you. I'll write about you all day, every day. But the unfortunate thing is, I'll also be writing about your sentencing, your conviction, and your prison time if you go and do this in a state like California. Because just because the precedent is there, that does not mean that it's being respected. Don't forget that when Brown versus Board of Ed occurred in the early 50s or whenever that was, it took almost a full decade before this stuff got put into statute by law. And look, we're still fighting that fight, and that's a civil rights fight, is it not? So that happened, in the 50s. The last Brown versus Board of Ed, and a lot of people don't realize this, Brown versus Board of Ed, there was, I think, 3 Brown cases. 3. And the third one only wrapped up in the 90s. Okay, so let that sink in. So here we are with a Bruen case right now. So we had Heller, we had McDonald, we had Catano, and we've had Bruen. And the absolute warp speed of rights returning that has happened in the wake of that is actually dwarfing what happened in Brown versus Board of Ed. So we still have a fight, we still have a battle, because we still have people standing in the doorway of our schoolhouses.
Right. Yeah. Well, yeah. And the way I put it, especially with Bruen wasn't the final victory. That wasn't the final boss at the end of the Nintendo game. And then once you're done, you know what I mean? Bruen was an extremely powerful tool that they handed the Second Amendment community and said, "Here, go to work." Now you actually have, a true weapon that's effective that you can use, across the board. I thought it was funny, within hours of him sending that email, and I wrote him back and politely explained, "Hey, here's what's going on." I mean, I'm not making fun of this guy or anything like that. He echoes.
No, not at all.
Guy.
And a lot of people don't understand the minutia behind it. It's complicated.
Yeah. But within hours of me getting that email, is when the decision came out from the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals saying, "Hey, you don't get normal capacity magazines anymore." Uh-huh. And I took the opportunity to show them, like, see, we're not, like, it ain't that simple. We still got to fight this thing. But is this something? This isn't new to you, right? This sentiment. Are you seeing this on the ground in New Jersey as well?
So it sounds to me like this individual is actually, number one, much more polite and much more learned than what I'm used to seeing, because what I'm used to seeing is who I call the shall not be infringed, group. And you see it across the country, not just New Jersey. And, they say, don't read the comments. Well, sometimes I read the comments, and you got the people that says, "Well, I don't understand. We're talking about this. It just says shall not be infringed." It's like, that is great. And I understand you and I am with you, but that doesn't change the fact that you're going to go to jail if you break these laws that you say are an infringement. So what we're trying to do is raise awareness so that we can deconstruct those laws and roll them back. Sometimes it's going to be slow, sometimes it's going to be fast, and sometimes we're going to go backwards. And just because it's an infringement and we're going to say that the Second Amendment is my permit, that's fine and dandy. And again, I'll come and visit you in prison if you're on the East Coast, and we'll do some prison interviews. It would be really great for my reputation to be able to talk to the guy that shall not be infringed, and now he's in prison and he's fighting the man. And by the time we litigate our way out of it, your sentence will be up, and then hopefully we could get you a pardon one day down the line. I mean, that's the way I see it.
Yeah, really. Exactly. All right. I think that's well put, well said. There's one more thing I wanted to do here. I'm going to make a major Gun Owners Radio announcement. I wanted you to be here for it, John. Okay, so Tim Walz was on Gavin Newsom, our illustrious governor. He was on his new podcast. He wants to be a podcaster, Gavin Newsom. So he's having all these super interesting guests, and one of them was Tim Walz. And if you don't remember who Tim Walz was, he was this guy who ran for vice president a few months ago. Very forgettable, but very strange guy. And he lost, but he's still the governor of Minnesota. So they had this conversation about, Gavin was basically saying, gee, what do we do to reach out to people who disagree with us? And Tim Walz had something very interesting to say. Let's watch the
to the Me Too movement. This
How do you
notion
fight
of
it?
this
I
notion
think
of
I could kick most of their ass. I do think that if they want to. I know I can run them, but I don't know if we're going to fall into that place where we want to. Okay, we challenge you to a WWE fight here type of thing. Counter
but
with
it's a natural reaction. I think it's one of the reasons we're losing so many men. And again, it's multi-ethnic. It's not just white men. We're losing them. We're losing them to these guys online. We're losing them people that I'm bringing on this podcast as well. That's why I brought.
These are bad guys, though. These are bad guys.
But they exist.
Okay, so that's what he had to say. He said that, he's pretty sure that he could kick the ass of people who he disagrees with and that they are bad people. So basically, if you voted for Trump, and he seemed to be talking about men only. So half the people who voted for Trump or so are men or people that he disagrees with. And he thinks that, he wants to kick their ass. So I watched this a few days ago. I've kind of been waiting for a reaction. This is the first time in U.S. history I've ever seen, a national leader, a governor, someone who ran for Second Amendment, threaten, physical violence against people he disagrees with. But nobody's really talking much about it. So I wanted to put it out there. I was waiting for somebody else. I mean, I'm just this, regional Second Amendment guy. But I'm willing to accept the challenge. This isn't a bit. It's not hyperbole. Governor Walz, let's go. I'm one of those people. I'm one of those Joe Lunchbox guys who disagrees with you politically. I voted for Trump, and I'm nothing special. I didn't serve in the military. I'm not professionally trained as a fighter. I definitely have some pounds to lose. I should be no problem for you. It's not like I'm some Navy SEAL, So you did serve in the military. I didn't serve in the military, like I said, for the last 25 years. I chose not to go to war, although you chose not to go to war too. So we do have that in common. Forgot about that. There's definitely, I think, you probably have one. I don't drink and drive. You do drink and drive. I think that's another thing that separates us. I would suggest we probably both be sober when this happens, but, wherever it needs to be, whatever ring, whatever backyard, whatever alley that you proposed, let's do this thing. I'm extremely offended that you would threaten hardworking people out there who simply have a different political opinion than you. And it's unbelievably offensive to me that a political leader, the governor of a state, a major state, any state, but especially a state like Minnesota, somebody that ran for vice president, is now physically threatening people who, disagree with you because they wake up in the morning and they go to work and, they're worried about inflation and they're worried about the things that their kids are being taught and they're worried about, a lot of things that have been happening over the past 4 years. And so therefore, they voted for someone else. These are guys that, drive pickup trucks and minivans and they pay taxes and they raise families, and for a political leader to say, hey, pretty sure I could kick their ass. They're bad people. Okay.
I was just going to say the crux of this is they said they're bad people. These are bad people. Like,
Yeah.
you're saying that the 51% of the country is bad people. Like, there's plenty of people that are Democratic that I'm not going to sit here and say they're bad people. There's plenty of Democrats that are wonderful people. So we can't even begin to and I'm a libertarian. I want to get that out of the way. Like, as far as party affiliation goes, like, I'm a constitutionalist, I'm more of a populist, whatever. Think what you will from that. But now he wants to engage in physical combat. I mean, I think that's great that you've accepted his call to arms, and I would like to be there to cover it, Michael.
Yeah, well, I definitely gonna need somebody in my corner, but yeah, cover it. But I'm totally serious. Whatever rules, like if you want to wear gloves, you don't want to wear gloves, wherever you want to do this, if you want to raise money for charity, or if you don't want to have any coverage at all, whatever you want to do. I mean, we could call it something cool like tearing down the walls or something. I don't know. Totally up to you, but I am not just going to sit here idly and just let that happen. So let's see. Put your money where your mouth is. Governor Walz, totally serious, not a bit. Let me know. It's easy to get a hold of me here at Gun Owners Radio. Let me know how you want to proceed. So I'm glad, John, that you were here for this big announcement. Again, it's not going to be the last time we're going to talk about it. We're going to keep talking about it. It's not right. It's not right on a personal, human level, and it's not right on a political level. I've never seen anything like this before, And the fact that Newsom just kind of, sat back and laughed at it, it makes it that much more offensive. So,
Well, Newsom's trying to position himself to be one of these bad people that Walz doesn't like. And he will never be a Joe Rogan. He'll never be even come off close as a centralist. He'll never be able to appeal to both sides because he's already done a tremendous amount of damage. He's not going to have an aha moment. But God bless him. Let him do his thing. I think that's great. And maybe there's going to be some good out of the content if you and Walz square off and go toe-to-toe. I mean, that would be a W right there, getting to watch that. I hope you win. I think you probably will. You also, if I handed you an A400 Beretta shotgun, you would be able to load and unload that probably without any coaching. And you also know where feminine hygiene products go. It doesn't sound like Tim does, but all being fair, it's cool, Yeah.
Well, again, just let me know, Coach, and we'll get this done. And, I'm looking forward to it. Win or lose, I think it's important that when someone mouths off like that and says something stupid, he said a lot of things that have been untrue or proven to be untrue. And so let's see if this is one of them. Does he really mean it? Or I don't know, maybe he doesn't. So anyway, John Petrolino, the Penn Patriot, thank you so much for joining the show. Where do people go to find more Petrolino content?
You can find me at thepenpatriot.com. I am on Facebook at The Penn Patriot. Instagram, a little bit of a curveball, is jpetrolino III. I also run a webpage called The Square Reviews. It's a product and travel review site, thesquarereviews.com. If you want to reach out and contact me, please send me an email, john@thepenpatriot.com. I'm always looking for news tips. I'm always open to criticism. No problem. I'll take the hate mail and I'll take the praise. It's equally important. And that's it, thepenpatriot.com.
Awesome. John, awesome. Thank you so much. Really appreciate your time. Always a pleasure having you. Thank you, everybody, for listening to Gun Owners Radio. Thank you, Dakota. Alicia, we'll see you next week. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. Sam, good job on your win today. Don't forget to get involved. Gun Owners Radio, we make activism easy. We'll see you next week.